The trade station orbiting the red moon was full of noise. Ships came and went, merchants shouted, and cargo moved fast. But Kyle moved through it all in silence, his coat long and dusty. He was a human trader, known for keeping to himself. He wasn't rich, but he was fair, and sometimes that was enough. He had come to collect payment from an alien merchant named Dravik. Dravik had promised him rare minerals, but something had gone wrong. When Kyle entered the storage bay, he saw no crates. Instead, Dravik stood nervously beside a small metal cage. Inside was a girlin alien girl with silver skin and golden eyes. "She's all I have," Dravik whispered, eyes darting around. "The cargo was stolen. Bandits took everything. Take her instead." "She's more valuable than you think." Kyle frowned. "I don't deal in slaves," he said flatly. Dravik held up his hands. "She's not marked by any chain gang. No collar. I swear she was taken by accident. She's quiet, obedient." "I thought she was mute." The girl looked up then, her eyes locked with Kyle's. They weren't afraid, they were calm. Sad and proud, Kyle couldn't explain why, but something in him shifted. He didn't see a slave. He saw someone broken, but not defeated. "Fine," Kyle said finally. "But if this is a trick," "No trick," Dravik said quickly. Unlocking the cage, she stepped out slowly, not limping, not begging. She didn't say a word, but kept her head high. Kyle handed her a cloak and led her toward his ship. He ignored the stares, ignored the whispers. Everyone thought he had bought a slave. Let them think what they wanted. He had taken her not as property, but because something told him she was important. Inside his ship, the girl sat quietly near the engine room. She didn't touch the food he offered. She only drank water and stared at the stars through the window. She never spoke, but her movements were smooth. Precise, not like someone raised. In chains, Kyle's crewmates asked questions, but he gave no answers. "She's with me now," was all he said. At night, he heard her humming softly in a strange language. He tried recording it, but the system glitched each time. Her voice had an effect on electronics he couldn't explain. One evening, as he walked past the corridor, he saw her tracing something. On her arm, a faint glow pulsed under her skin, a strange tattoo. It looked like a symbol, a crest, or a seal. Kyle took a scan and ran it through the ship's archive, but no matches came up, not even in the royal databases he hacked long ago. That night, she stood by the window again. Her voice was quiet, but this time she spoke. "Why did you accept me?" she asked without turning around. Kyle froze. "You spoke?" he said slowly. "I chose to," she replied. "Now answer." He walked closer, unsure what to say. "Something told me you weren't what you seemed." She smiled faintly. "You're right," she said. "But if you knew who I was, you'd probably return me." "I don't think I would," Kyle said. She turned then, her eyes soft but sad. "I was once powerful," she whispered. "Now, my shadow." "Then let's start with a name," he said. She hesitated, then whispered Zaire. Suddenly alarms blared on the ship. Kyle rushed to the console. An unknown ship had entered orbit. It wasn't broadcasting any ID, but it had weapons, hot pirates. One crew member asked. Kyle looked at Zaire. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. "No," she said, "hunters." He stared at her. "What kind of hunters?" "The kind who know who I really am," she whispered. Kyle looked out the window. At the dark ship moving toward them, something deep in his gut told him this was no ordinary girl. And whatever truth she carried, it was about to shake everything he believed. The ship trembled slightly as the unknown vessel moved closer. Kyle's fingers danced across the control panel, trying to block scans and mask their heat signature. He looked back at the girl now. Zaru stood still like stone. Her eyes were fixed on the screen, following the hunter ship's slow approach. "You said hunters," Kyle said, his voice low. "What are they hunting?" "Me," Zara replied without blinking. "You need to tell me why," Kyle said. "Because I'm risking everything by keeping you here." Zara slowly stepped forward, her voice cold but calm. "I was taken from my family, from my world." "Not sold, but stolen." Kyle narrowed his eyes. "Taken from what kind of family?" She didn't answer, not yet. Instead, she reached up and tapped something behind her ear. A shimmer passed over her skin, and for a second, her silver tone flickered, revealing blue patterns beneath. Then, a glowing symbol appeared near her collarbone. Kyle stared. "That mark. That's royal tech," he whispered. Zaira nodded once. "I am Princess Zaira of the Zalari Empire," she said, "and I was next in line to rule." Silence filled the room. Kyle's crew stood frozen behind him. No one speaking. The truth hung in the air like fire. "You're saying I have a royal fugitive on board," Kyle said slowly. Zaira tilted her head. "Not a fugitive. A survivor." Before anyone could respond, the ship's alarm buzzed again. The hunter vessel had locked onto them, preparing to board. Kyle didn't waste time. He hit the emergency lift and yelled, "Everyone to stations." "Zara with me?" They ran through the corridors, his mind racing. He had thought he took in a slave, maybe a servant, but now he knew he had rescued someone the galaxy wanted, either controlled or dead. In the engine room, Zaira stopped suddenly. She walked to a storage locker, opened it, and pulled out a weapon. Kyle frowned. "How did you know that was in there?" She smirked slightly. "I grew up training with humans. My guards taught me everything they knew." She powered up the weapon and moved like a soldier. No hesitation, no fear. Kyle stared at her. "You were never a slave," he said. "Not for a single second," she replied. "But I had to pretend. Or they would have killed me before reaching you." The hunter ship began docking. Metal scraped against metal. Zaira pressed her back against the wall, her breath steady. Kyle joined her, holding his own blaster tight. "Why me?" he whispered. She looked at him, her expression softer now. "Because you were different," she said. "When you looked at me, I felt safe." The door burst open. Smoke filled the hallway. Hunters in black armor stormed inside. Zaira moved like lightning, blasting the first two before they could react. Kyle followed her lead. Firing with deadly aim, the fight was quick. And brutal blood on the floor, sparks in the air, and bodies falling. Zaira didn't stop until they were all down. Kyle stared at her, breathing hard. "You really are royalty," he muttered. She didn't respond, just stood there with her blaster smoking. A moment later, she dropped to her knees. "Are you hurt?" he asked, running to her side. She shook her head. "I just didn't want to kill again," she whispered. "But you did," he said gently. "Yes," she said. "For you." They pulled the hunter bodies into the airlock and dumped them into space. The moment passed in silence. Then Kyle looked at her. "What now?" he asked. Zaira looked at the stars again. "I need to return," she said. "There are still people loyal to me, but I can't do it alone." Kyle crossed his arms. "Sounds like a suicide mission." "Maybe," she said with a sad smile. "But with you, I might survive it." He thought for a long moment. She was dangerous, powerful, and now marked by bounty hunters across the galaxy. But she was also honest, brave, and carrying something bigger than pride. She carried hope. Kyle nodded. "All right, Princess," he said. "Let's get your throne back." And just like that, the man who thought he was taking in a slave had chosen to stand beside a queen in hiding. The ship floated in silence above a dead moon. Kyle had powered down everything in Jane's, lights, even life support for a while. He didn't want to risk detection. After the battle, the bounty hunters would send more. They always did. Zaira sat on the floor in the cargo bay, wrapping her arm with a cloth. A small burn marked her skin from the blaster fight. Kyle watched her quietly, wondering again who she really was underneath the royal blood. Not just her name or title, but the way she moved, like someone trained for war, like someone who'd seen too much pain for her age. You didn't flinch, he said, walking over. When the shooting started, I was trained not to. She replied, her voice tired, but it still hurts afterward. Kyle knelt beside her. You were next in line to rule the Zalari Empire, he said. That's not a small thing. No, she whispered. It's not. And that's why they wanted me dead. Zaira explained everything slowly. Her mother had ruled the empire with fairness, but rivals grew jealous, especially the council's military wing. A secret coup took down her family. Her father was executed. In the palace garden, her mother poisoned in her sleep. Zaire escaped only because a guard who loved her risked everything to smuggle her out. She was 12 years old when she vanished to the galaxy. She was dead to her enemies. She was a ghost that needed to be erased. She changed names, planets, and even species appearances using nano-disguises. But eventually, she was captured and sold into silence, hidden among common slaves, until Kyle accepted her. You were supposed to sell me, she said, or lock me in some dark place, but you gave me a bed and water. Like I was human, Kyle shrugged. You looked lost, he said, and I've been there myself. A beeping sound cut through the room. One of the data pads was showing an alert, a bounty board update. Kyle picked it up, eyes scanning. The words, then his mouth tightened. They've raised the price on your head, he said. 10 million credits. Dead or alive, Zaira stood up slowly, and you're still standing next to me. I'm not for sale, Kyle replied, and neither are my friends. She smiled at him, small, soft, rare. It made something twist in his chest. But before he could speak, the ship jolted slightly. Kyle rushed to the cockpit. Another signal was approaching, this time smaller, quieter. It wasn't a bounty ship, but a transmission. Encrypted, but not hostile. He glanced back at Zaira. She looked at the screen, and her eyes widened. That's a royal code, she whispered. Very old. Only used by loyal guards. Kyle opened the message carefully. A simple sentence blinked on the screen. If you are alive, meet us at the hidden moon sector V7 Delta. Zara touched the screen gently. They survived, she breathed. At least some of them. Kyle didn't waste time. He set course for the hidden moon, but he also powered up weapons. He wasn't going to walk into another trap as they traveled through hyperspace. Zaire spent her time in silence. Sometimes she meditated. Sometimes she trained her movements sharp. Focused, deadly. She taught Kyle's crew hand signals from her empire's elite guard. At first, they laughed. Then they listened. Then they learned. One night, Kyle found her staring at an old hologram. It showed her as a child, sitting on a throne beside her mother. He sat next to her quietly. Do you still want the throne? He asked. No, she said. I want justice. Then I'll decide what I deserve. The ship dropped out of hyperspace near the hidden moon. It was dark and covered in dust clouds, but deep in the fog. A signal pulsed softly. Kyle followed it to an old base carved into stone. They landed and waited, weapons ready. The doors opened slowly, and out stepped 3 figures in royal armor. One of them fell to his knees when he saw Zaira. Princess, he said, tears in his eyes, you live. Zaira stepped forward. I need your help, she said, and your trust. They brought her inside, where she saw the scattered remains of her old world maps, data cores, emblems of the crown. She touched one gently, her fingers shaking. I will rise again, she whispered, but I will not rise alone. Kyle stood in the doorway, watching her with new eyes. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a storm-gathering force. And he was right in the middle of it. Asterisk, the hidden moon base was old. Dust covered the walls. and power flickered in the halls. But to Zara, it felt like home. Pieces of her past were here shattered. But still breathing, Kyle walked beside her. As the royal guard showed them secret tunnels and rooms, maps of old Zelrai battle fleets, lost codes, ancient technology, they were hidden in this place for years. General Auric, one of the last loyalists, stood tall despite his age. He bowed when Zaira entered the command room. "I followed your mother," he said, "and now I follow you." Zaira nodded with quiet strength. "I don't want blind loyalty," she said. "I want to rebuild." Smarter, better. Kyle watched her take charge. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was leading. But not everyone liked that. One of Kyle's own crew members, a quiet man named Jace, had grown distant. He often left meetings early, always. Checking his private comms, Kyle noticed but said nothing. He hoped Jace just needed time. He was wrong. 2 nights later, alarms screamed through the base. Bounty ships had jumped into orbit fast. Many armed. Someone had betrayed their location. And Kyle already knew who it was. He found Jace near the comms room. The man had a pack slung over his shoulder and a data pad in hand. "You told them," Kyle said, his voice low. Jace didn't deny it. "I sent coordinates to the Zarn hunters," he said. "They offered 10 million credits. Enough to buy my own moon." Kyle's fist connected with Jace's jaw before he could say another word. Jace hit the floor hard, groaning. "You sold out a princess," Kyle said, breathing hard. "And all of us with her. She's not my princess." Jace spat. "She's just another alien." Kyle grabbed him by the collar. "She's more human than you," he growled, but there was no time for more blasters fired outside. The base was under attack. Kyle locked Jace in a cell and ran to find Zaira. She was already suited up in armor made from old royal gear. The crest of her family glowed on her chest. "I'm not hiding this time," she said. Grabbing her weapon, Kyle stood by her side. "Then I'm not hiding either." The battle was fast and brutal. Bounty hunters stormed the tunnels. Firing blindly, loyal guards pushed back hard, using tight formations and ambushes. Zaire moved like fire-leading charges. Defending her people, she took a shot to the shoulder but didn't slow down. Kyle covered her as they moved through smoke and debris. The sound of blasters filled the air. Explosions shook the walls. One section of the base collapsed, taking 3 loyal guards with it. Still, they fought. In the center of the base, Kyle and Zaira were surrounded. More bounty hunters dropped in from above. Zaira fired until her weapon overheated, then grabbed a blade. She fought hand-to-hand like a warrior born. Kyle held the line beside her, refusing to fall. But there were too many. One bounty hunter tackled Zaira from behind. Pinning her, another struck Kyle in the ribs. Knocking him down, they were both captured, dragged through the smoke and blood. Zira's eyes burned with rage. "Let me go, and I'll give you a clean death," she hissed. But the hunter only laughed. "Oh, we're not killing you," he said. "We're taking you to the auction." Kyle was beaten, blood running down his face. "Cowards," he muttered. The hunter kicked him hard. "You're just cargo now," he sneered. "Both of you." They were thrown into the prison hold of a dark ship. Kyle tried to stay awake, but pain pulled him under. He heard Zaira whisper something before he blacked out. A soft phrase in her native tongue, something royal, something sacred. Hours passed, or maybe days. When Kyle woke up, the cell was open. Sparks flew from broken panels and smoke filled. The hallway blaster marks lined the walls. Zaira stood above him, injured but alive. In her hand was a stolen control key. "I told you," she said with a faint smile. "I'm not a slave." She had broken out, taken down 3 guards, and hacked the ship's system using her royal implants. She helped Kyle up. "We're going to crash this thing," she said. and vanish before they know what hit them. Kyle coughed and laughed at the same time. "Remind me never to cross you. You already did," she said. "And look where we are now," as they fought their way to the control deck. One thing was clear. Wiser was not just a girl with a title. She was a storm wrapped in royal blood, and no chains could hold her. The stolen ship crashed through the atmosphere of a forgotten planet. Fire streaked across the sky as the engines failed one by one. Kyle held onto the control panel, trying to guide them down. Zaya stood beside him, pale from blood loss. But, still giving orders, the ship groaned as metal tore against gravity's pull. "Brace yourself," Kyle shouted. The ground rushed toward them. They hit hard. The sound of impact echoed through the jungle. Trees snapped. Smoke poured from the wreck. And silence followed. For a moment, Kyle heard nothing but ringing in his ears. Then a cough. Weak but alive, Zaire crawled out of the broken hatch, one hand clutching her shoulder. Kyle followed, limping, scanning their surroundings. The planet was dense with green tall trees, thick vines, glowing mushrooms. It felt untouched by war, by machines, by time. "This place," Zaire whispered. "I've seen it before. In a map." Long ago, they walked through the jungle, careful with every step. Birds with crystal wings flew overhead, and small creatures peeked from hollow trees. After 2 hours, they found it hidden under a thick wall of roots and rock. A sealed door covered in royal symbols. Zaira stepped forward and placed her hand on the lock. The symbol on her collarbone lit up. The door hissed open, revealing a tunnel. "This was one of my people's secret archives," she said. Not even the council knew it existed. Inside, the tunnels were clean, untouched, powered by old energy cells that still pulsed faintly. Walls were lined with memory crystals, ancient tech, and coded weapons. A central chamber sat beneath a glowing dome. Kyle looked around in awe. "This place is a fortress, I say," he said. "It's a sanctuary," Zara replied, "built for the last of my kind. In case of betrayal, they set up camp inside, tending to wounds, recharging devices, and scanning old records." Zaira found a map of old resistance bases, lost allies, and hidden supply routes. They weren't alone, there were still fragments of her empire, waiting for a signal. Days passed. Kyle helped repair old defense drones. Zaira studied ancient records, searching for weaknesses in the rebel-controlled Zelari government. She looked different, now focused, royal, unshakable, but in quiet moments when Kyle brought her food or sat beside her, she still smiled. One evening, they sat together under the dome as stars blinked through the transparent ceiling. "Do you miss them?" Kyle asked softly. "My parents." Zaya replied, "Every night." She held a glowing crystal with her mother's voice inside, a message never meant to be heard again. Kyle didn't speak, but he reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Suddenly, an alert beeped from the old console, a transmission weak, broken but real. Zaire ran to it, boosting the signal. A face flickered on the screen, covered in shadows, but familiar. "Princess, if you hear this, the last loyal fleet waits near the edge of the drift belt. We need a leader." Then static. Zaira stared at the screen, her hands trembling. Kyle placed a hand on her shoulder. "You have your army," he said. "Now you need a plan." But they weren't alone. Far above the planet, a small probe had detected the signal burst. It sent a message back to the rebels, one word only: Zaira. Back underground, Zaire stood in the command room of the archive. She had changed now, wearing full royal armor. The sigil of her house displayed proudly. Kyle entered, eyes narrowing at the sight. "You're ready?" he said. "I have to be," she replied. "They took everything from me. It's time I take it back, but we don't have a fleet yet," Kyle warned. "No," she said, "but I have you, this base." And the last codes of the old empire, they began sending encrypted messages across the old resistance channels, calling out to hidden captains, former allies. Those who still remembered her family's name, one by one, answers came back. Short, direct, loyal. We follow the flame. Zyra lives. Coordinates received. Preparing jump, Zyra. Turn to Kyle. For years I was alone, she said. Running, hiding, surviving, and now. He asked. Now I rise, she whispered. Outside the jungle was calm, but in the sky above. War was coming, and this time Zyra would not run. Asterisk, the skies above the hidden planet were no longer safe. Scout drones had appeared at the edge of orbit. Zyra watched from the cliff, her royal armor gleaming in the sun. They've found us, she said quietly. Kyle stood beside her, adjusting his weapon. Then we hit first, he replied. Inside the underground archive, loyalists prepared for war. More ships were arriving, small vessels, stealth craft. Forgotten fighters that once flew under her. Family's banner, each crew swore allegiance to Zyra the moment they saw her. They didn't need proof. They saw it in her eyes, the same eyes her mother had. Zyra stood before them in the command chamber. This is not about revenge, she said. It's about justice. They took our homes, our families, our freedom, but they forgot who we are. She lifted the royal blade high. We are Zalari, she declared, and tonight we take back the stars. The plan was dangerous. They would strike. A rebel shipyard deep in the drift belt where enemy ships were built and repaired. If they took it, they could cripple the rebel fleet before a full invasion began. It was guarded, armed, and crawling with enemies. But Zyra had something they didn't knowledge. The shipyard used old codes still tied to her bloodline. If she got close enough, she could override the defense system. I'll go with you, Kyle said. Zyra looked at him, her voice calm but firm. It's not your fight. I made it mine the day I took you in, he said. She didn't argue, she just nodded. They flew out in a small strike team, 6 ships, masked by asteroids, moving through the dark like shadows. The rebel shipyard floated ahead, massive and silent. Surrounded by defense turrets, Kyle's hands gripped the control stick as they drifted closer. Inside the enemy base, alarms began to flicker. Someone had detected them, but Zyra was already moving. She entered the access codon, ancient override linked to her DNA. The turrets powered down one by one. Go, she ordered. Loyal fighters rushed in. Blasting through docking arms and enemy patrols, explosions lit the black sky. The rebels scrambled, but they were unprepared. Their own defenses had turned against them. Zyra and Kyle landed inside the central control tower. It was a maze of steel and fire. They moved fast, taking down guards with clean precision. Kyle watched her fight every strike. Every step was like watching fire in motion. She wasn't just a princess now. She was a warrior queen. At the core terminal, Zyra accessed the command uplink. She began uploading a virus one designed by her mother long ago. If successful, it would lock down the entire rebel fleet for 24 hours, enough time for loyal forces to regroup and strike. Suddenly, the screen flickered. A new voice echoed through the chamber. Teve, cold and cruel. Zyra it, said. A man appeared on the screen. General Varn, the one who led the coup. I see you finally stopped hiding. Zyra's hands didn't stop typing. I'm not hiding, she said. I'm winning. Varn smiled. You're alone. Child, am I? She asked, stepping aside behind her. Screens lit up each, showing loyal ships jumping into the sector. Dozens, then hundreds. The Zalari flame had returned. Varn's smile faded. This isn't over, he said. No, Zara replied. It's just beginning. The upload completed. Kyle grabbed Zyra's hand. We need to move now. They ran as explosions rocked the tower. Escape pods fired out into space. And loyal ships picked them up one by one. Zaire and Kyle made it out just before the control center went up in flames. Hours later, aboard a loyal cruiser, Zaire looked down at the stars. The rebel fleet was crippled, the shipyard burning, and for the first time in years, hope returned. Kyle walked up beside her, holding 2 mugs of hot drink. Not bad for a princess. He said with a grin. She smiled, tired but alive. Not bad for a traitor, she replied. They sat together in silence. No more secrets, no more chains, only stars ahead and war behind. But Zaira knew the battle wasn't done. The council would come for her now, faster, harder. The real war was still waiting, and she would be ready. The royal flagship hovered in the silence of deep space. Its hull still bore scorch marks from the last battle. But the banner of the Zalari Empire flew again. Zaire stood alone in the throne room, looking out through the wide viewport below. The stars drifted like embers. Behind her, commanders waited. Nobles whispered and courtiers observed, but all eyes were on her. She had done what no one believed possible. She had returned from death, rallied the scattered loyalists, and struck the rebels where it hurt. Now they begged her to take the crown, to become Empress Ray, rightful ruler of the Zelari people. But she hesitated. The crown meant power. Yes, but also chains of another kind. Expectations, rules, sacrifices, and above all, separation from the one person who had stood by her without asking anything in return. Kyle, he stood in the shadows of the hall, not in armor, not in command uniform, just as he was, a man who had accepted a stranger in chains and saw something. Morzera turned to the council. I will speak to the people, she said, and then I will give my answer. The broadcast went live across the Empire sectors, from ruined colonies to hidden worlds. Her face lit the skies. She stood before the ancient flame of unity, a symbol of her bloodline. This is not the return of an empire, she said. This is the return of our soul. I was once a child, alone, hunted, and forgotten. But I survived, not because I was royal, but because someone treated me as a person first. She paused, her voice steady, but soft. I will wear the crown not as a ruler above others, but as a leader among equals, and I will name no prince or noble as my consort. I name the man who saved me when I was nothing, who stood with me when I had nothing, who saw me not as a princess, but as Zaira. Gasps filled the council hall. Kyle looked up, stunned. Ayura stepped down from the platform and walked toward him. She reached out her hand. Kyle of Earth, she said, will you stand with me, not behind me, but beside me for the rest of your life? He didn't speak, not right away. He simply took her hand and whispered, always. But not everyone was pleased. Voices rose in anger behind the scenes, old bloodlines, alien houses. And power-hungry lords whispered of betrayal. She names a human. One hissed, a common traitor. Another spat, but Zaira heard them all. Later that night, she walked the upper decks alone. Kyle followed quietly. You made enemies today, he said. I made a choice, she replied, and I'll make it again. You don't have to do this, he said softly. You can rule without tying yourself to someone like me. Zayar turned, eyes glowing under the starlight. I can't, she said, because I'm not just ruling. I'm rebuilding. They walked in silence for a while. The stars around them shifted slowly as the flagship moved toward the final frontier, toward the heart of rebel space. A final battle waited. The Council's core fleet, protected by a fortress. World Zero's rise had shaken them, but they hadn't fallen. Not yet. You should sleep. Kyle said, you'll need your strength. Zaira looked out into the void. I'll rest when the stars remember who we are. She whispered the next morning as the war fleet gathered for the final assault. Zyra stepped into the command bridge, fully armored, crown floating just above her head. Her voice echoed across the ships. Today, we end the silence that followed my family's fall. Today, we remind the galaxy that no power born of fear will stand forever. And we do it together, not as conquerors, but as those who rose from ashes. Kyle stood at her side, sword at his belt, not as her protector, but as her equal. Her heart, her shield, her choice, and as the stars lit up with warships and fire, Zyra gave the order to jump. One final war stood between them and peace. Between past and future, between loss and legacy. But she was no longer the girl in chains. She was the crown. And Kyle, he was the fire she carried inside.